What if the person you're most afraid of becoming is already inside you? Aragorn waited 87 years to claim a throne that was his by birth. We're told it was humility. It wasn't. It was fear. Fear of a weakness he inherited before he ever drew a sword. Tolkien writes bloodlines, and Aragorn's bloodline carries a wound older than he is. To understand why he ran from the crown, you have to understand the man who lost it 3,000 years before he was born. Isildur stood at the crack of doom with the One Ring in his hand. He had every reason to destroy it. Elrond begged him to. And Isildur, the king, the hero, the man who cut the ring from Sauron's hand, looked at it and kept it. That is the moment Aragorn is born into. Not his actual birth. The moment his name begins to mean something. He is the heir of the man who failed at the last step, the man strong enough to win the war, and weak enough to lose the peace. This is what psychologists call an inherited shadow, a flaw that lives in the family before it lives in you. You didn't choose it. You didn't earn it. But once you learn it's there, you start watching yourself for signs of it. And Aragorn has been watching himself his entire life. There's a detail most people miss. Aragorn doesn't just know about Isildur's failure, he carries the broken sword. For most of his life, the shards of Narsil travel with him, wrapped, hidden, but never put down. Imagine carrying the weapon of your ancestor's worst moment every day for decades. That is not a man at peace with his lineage. That is a man who refuses to let himself forget. Because here's the question that haunts him. If Isildur, stronger, older, a king already crowned, couldn't resist the ring, what chance does he have? So he runs. Not from danger. Aragorn never runs from danger. He runs from the throne. He grows up hidden in Rivendell under a false name. Elrond raises him under the name Estelle, Hope. He doesn't learn his true lineage until he's 20 years old, and the moment he does, he leaves. He becomes Strider, a ranger, a man without a country, going by names that aren't his for decades. But Strider is not just Aragorn hiding from the world. Strider is Aragorn building a life where he never has to become fully visible. And that matters. Because for most people, fear does not look like panic. It looks like responsibility. It looks like service. It looks like staying busy enough that no one asks why you never step into the thing you were actually made for. Aragorn spends years protecting people who barely know his name. He guards roads. He watches borders. He keeps darkness away from villages that would probably fear him if they saw him walking past their door. Hobbits sleep safely in the Shire because men like Aragorn are out in the wild, bleeding quietly where no one can see. And that sounds noble. It is noble. But it is also a hiding place. Because Strider can serve without being crowned. He can suffer without being seen. He can help everyone else survive while never asking whether he himself is allowed to live fully. That is one of the most painful things Tolkien understood. Sometimes the smaller role is not chosen because we are humble. Sometimes we choose it because it protects us from the terror of becoming known. Because if Aragorn stays Strider, he can never fail as king. If he stays in the wild, he never has to find out whether Isildur's weakness lives inside him too. And then there is Arwen. This is where the wound becomes even more personal. Because Arwen does not look at Aragorn and see a ruined bloodline. She does not see only Isildur. She sees the man he could become. She sees the king before he can bear to see him in himself. And that kind of love is terrifying when you do not trust your own heart. Arwen is willing to give up immortality for him. Think about how enormous that is. An elf, stepping out of forever, choosing death one day, choosing grief, choosing the short life of men because she believes Aragorn is worth it. And Aragorn still pulls away. Not because he does not love her, he loves her deeply. Think about that. The throne is waiting, the blade is waiting, and he chooses again and again to stay in the rain. We remember the king. We forget the 87 years of a man hiding from his own name. And this is where Tolkien stops writing only about Aragorn and starts writing about you, because you have an Isildur too. Maybe it's a parent who drank, a father who left, a temper that runs in the family, an anxiety, a coldness, a way of disappearing when things get hard, something you watch someone you love get destroyed by. And ever since you noticed it in them, You've been quietly watching yourself for it. You tell yourself you're being careful, you're being humble, you're not ready, you need more time, more healing, more proof that you're different from them. But underneath, the truth is simpler and harder. You're afraid that if you step into the life that's yours, the same thing that broke them will break you. And that fear can become invisible because it starts to sound reasonable. You call it patience, you call it maturity, you tell yourself you are protecting people from the worst parts of you. But sometimes what you are really doing is letting the past make decisions for you. Aragorn's fear is powerful because it is not childish. It makes sense. Isildur really did fail. The ring really did corrupt him. The bloodline really does carry a shadow. And that is what makes inherited fear so hard to escape. It always has evidence. You can point to the family history. You can point to the damage. You can point to the person who fell apart before you and say, see? This is what happens to people like us. But Tolkien's answer is not that Aragorn was never in danger of becoming Isildur. He was. That is the point. The shadow was real, the temptation was real, the fear was not imaginary, but fear being understandable does not make it truthful, and a wound being inherited does not mean it has to be obeyed. At some point, Aragorn has to realize that avoiding the throne is still a choice. Refusing the name is still a choice. Staying small is still a choice. And maybe that is the part that hurts the most. Because if the throne was his the whole time, then the years in the reign were not only exile. They were delay. They were the cost of letting fear speak louder than calling. So you stay in the rain. You take the smaller role. You don't claim the relationship. You don't write the book. You don't start the thing. You tell everyone, and yourself, that you're not ready. That is Aragorn's real story. Because Aragorn doesn't become king by defeating Sauron. Sauron is the external villain, the easy part. Aragorn becomes king by doing 3 things anyone carrying an inherited shadow has to do. First, he lets the sword be reforged. Narsil, the blade that failed Isildur, has been broken for 3,000 years. Aragorn doesn't ask for a new sword with no history. He asks for the old one, made whole, renamed Anduril, the Flame of the West. He stops pretending the wound isn't his. He picks it up and says, "This is mine now." Second, he walks the paths of the dead. He faces oath-breakers, men who failed exactly the way his ancestor failed, men who broke their word and were cursed for it. Aragorn doesn't avoid them. He commands them. He stands with the thing he's been running from. Failure, broken promises, the dead weight of men who couldn't keep their word, and he doesn't flinch. He uses it. That's what integration looks like, not making the shadow go away, making it serve you. And third, at the Black Gate, in front of every soldier left in the free world, with Mordor watching, he says his name, not Strider, not Ranger, not Estelle. He says it in full, LSR, Telcontar, heir of Isildur. He claims the bloodline, wound and all, in front of the enemy that destroyed his ancestor. That is the moment he becomes king, not the coronation, the naming. Because you cannot integrate a shadow you won't admit is yours. You cannot inherit a throne you won't put your real name on. Aragorn wasn't waiting to be ready. He was waiting to stop being afraid of himself, and the throne was his the whole time.